Our show is now on Stitcher. Listen to us on your iPhone, Android phone, Kindle Fire, and other devices with Stitcher. Stitcher is smart radio for your phone. Find it in your App Store or on Stitcher.com. Stitcher Smart Radio, the smarter way to listen to radio.
Pray with me if you will. Come, Holy Spirit, come. Come with the fire and burn. Come with the rain and cleanse. Come with the wind and breathe. Come with the light and reveal. Convict us, convert us, consecrate us. Claim and call us with your care and concern, O God, until we do something. Amen. This reading from Luke's account of the life of Jesus points to the difficulty faced by Jesus, especially at home. The notion of a prophet not being accepted at home was not new. The clarification is found in the phrase, "Is this not Joseph's son?" which, like its counterpart in Mark 6:3, is more of a remark indicating a low-level hostility rather than surprise. Research of early Christian writing from the 3rd century quotes, "No prophet is acceptable in his own country, and no physician performs cures on those who know him," are direct references to those papyrus. That's a wonderful scholarly term, which means the earliest recorded documents. Also, the Elijah and Elisha stories are directly out of Kings 17 and Kings 5, respectively. References to the food shortage and the healing of Naaman, the Syrian, are further proof texts that the mystery of the holy presence of God is part of the tradition in which Jesus stands. Some commentaries point outright that this passage, along with the tradition of Luke Acts, is a direct setting up of the natural tension which existed between the followers of Jesus and the religious leaders of the early church. It's all about hearing and listening, and we see the mishearing of what Jesus says and what is heard time and again. As some of you know, my wife teaches for accounting for a local university. She was at a video conferencing meeting about a week ago, along with her colleagues. As she was listening, she noticed that either her hearing was off or the sound was not great, allowing part of the message to be lost. She kept on listening, and finally she leaned over to a colleague and said, "Is it my hearing, or is there something wrong with the audio?" Her colleague stopped and said, "I stopped listening 10 minutes ago. The audio is terrible." I know for myself there are times when missing even a single word has cost me to do the easiest and most frequent exercise of my life. That would be jumping to conclusions because I misheard. There are times in conversation with my beloved Sue that I realize that we are having an in-depth and detailed conversation, just not about the same thing. Now, if this can happen between two people who love and respect each other, imagine if it is not someone we know well or respect. We hear things that we're not quite sure we hear correctly, and yet we make judgments, assumptions. Paul Kantner, the guitarist and founding member of the Jefferson Airplane, died the other day at 74. Beyond the fact that it seemed too soon and these geezer rockers, as I call them, seem to be dropping like flies in the last couple of weeks, and they're far too close to my age. Beyond that it seemed too soon, he was a bit of a character. That doesn't mean he didn't have character, but he was a bit of a character. In an interview from the 90s that was posted on the internet, he said a couple of things that seemed a bit outrageous, or perhaps maybe even defined him. He said that in 1966 he was in college and seemed destined either to take his own life or take up bank robbing. And fortunately, music offered me another path, he said. He went on to say that he and his bandmates had the good fortune to discover Fender double reverb amps and LSD in the same week. And then he paused and said, well, maybe it was misfortune. I confess, when I read this online, I had to read it twice to get the full meaning. It just skipped by me. So here we have the account, according to Luke, of the hometown reaction to Jesus in person. Not a very glowing report, it seems. So is it the truth, we ask? Well, it's certainly the truth according to Luke. Remember that Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the so-called synoptic gospels, because they share a common core of material, were written about 100 years after the birth of Jesus and roughly 60 years after his passion. So they are truth after a fashion. Or as Dr. John Dominic Crossan, a noted biblical scholar, is fond of saying, they have the ring of truth about them. There's a wonderful movie, it's at least a couple of decades ago. I didn't bother to look it up because I probably would have wanted to watch it, but it was titled A Few Good Men. In a key scene, characters played by Tom Cruise, who is a defense attorney for some young Marines accused of violating military protocol. Cruise is asking the colonel, who is the commanding officer, some penetrating questions. The character, played by Jack Nicholson, seems to fill the screen with his presence. He finally asks the Cruise character, "What do you want?" To which Cruise retorts, "I want the truth." And then the key phrase that the Nicholson character offers is, "You can't handle the truth," followed by a wonderful speech on why the truth is overrated and when put against the interest of a free society, the truth is unimportant. Sticking to this film analogy, this past week I read and listened to a film review for Disney's new release, The Finest Hours. And it's apparently a well-anticipated film. The LA Times and the Daily News reporters loved it and thought it was a wonderful, well-written, well-directed, well-acted film. You can look up these reviews either on the internet or in your papers. But I also listened to Film Week on the NPR station out of Pasadena, and 2 out of 3 of the film critics, these are people who make their living writing film criticism, 2 absolutely hated it. They eviscerated it. They could not find enough nasty things to say about this film. 1 was just sort of lukewarm. So I started turning this question over in my head, so wanting to ask, did they see the same film? Which of course we assume they did. However, what they were saying is what rings true for one might not ring true at all for another. Beloved, in a touch more than a week, on the 10th, we will start the 40-day tradition of Lent, which traces the life of Jesus from the temptation narrative through the miracles and healings and into the passion narrative. In John 18:37, we find Jesus at trial being questioned by the Roman Pilate, who asks Jesus if he is the king of the Jews, to which Jesus replies, "So say you." When asked why he is here, Jesus replies, to bear witness to the truth, to which Pilate offers that chilling phrase, what is truth? Well, in the age of political spin and manufactured history, we know that truth is malleable. Here's a thought from more than 40 years ago from my favorite sociology teacher, Royal Martin. He told us a story of having been a young man at the University of Texas, and there is only one in Texas, though there are 1,000 universities. And he said he was at a dance, and he finally grew up enough gumption to walk across and ask a young woman to dance. And he said, "May I have this dance?" And the young woman said, "No." At an intermission, she came across the floor and says, "Why did you ask me to dance and then leave?" And he said, "Because I said, 'May I have this dance?' and you said no." And she said, "No, what I heard you say was, 'Is this dance taken?' And I said, no." The problem with speaking and hearing is pretty common. Most of us, and I stand at the head of this line, most of us are anticipating what we're going to say next rather than listening fully engaged to those who speak to us. On Martin Luther King Monday, two weeks ago, is that right? On the 18th. I listened to most, not all, of a 3-hour, this was network-wide, I happen to be listening to the Pasadena station, titled King's Last March, and it detailed the life and the passion, and by that I don't mean the assassination, but the passion with which Dr. King lived. And they interviewed people and talked with people who had known him, from Andrew Young to others who had encountered him over his life. And in one of those interviews, they interviewed Bono of U2 on the song that U2 did. I have confessed that I have mostly known it as In the Name of Love. It was Norman Kelsey who actually told me the real name is Pride. And it's not a comparison or contrast. It's sort of a dovetailing of the lives of Jesus and the life of Dr. King, how their lives as men of peace, that they died at the hand of hate and violence, is telling. But the interesting thing, so committed are we to trying to get what we say and do right. Bono admitted that he got the lyric wrong. In the song, he talks about in the early morning of April 4th, shots rang out. And he said, "It was later that I realized I got it wrong, that it was actually near dusk when Dr. King was assassinated." And he said, "It shouldn't trouble me, but it does. So frequently I change the lyric when I sing." Is it important that we get it right? Of course it is. But it's also important that we listen, and rather than correct each other for each spoken mistake, that we say, "I know what they meant. I don't have to correct them." I close with an interesting and anonymous little statement. And this is male-centric, but you could say woman at any point. The man whispered, "God, speak to me." And a meadowlark sang, but the man did not hear. So the man yelled, "God, speak to me." Thunder rolled across the sky, but the man did not listen. The man looked around and said, "God, let me see you." A star shone brightly, but he noticed it not. And the man shouted, God, show me a miracle. And a life was born, but the man was unaware. So the man cried out in despair, touch me, God, and let me know that you are here. Whereupon God reached down and touched the man. But the man brushed the butterfly away and walked on, certain that he could neither hear or touch nor feel holiness. The problem with the unheard word isn't that we need hearing aids. Though I've listened to enough rock and roll and done enough drag racing to admit that I know I've diminished my hearing. I've said to people that I heard Jimi Hendrix up close and personal with all those Marshall amps. And the person looked at me and said, was it worth it for the hearing loss? And I said, absolutely. But it doesn't mean I still can't hear. I need to pay attention. We all do.
Thank you for listening to the First United Methodist Church podcast, which is recorded live every week at 4832 Tujunga Avenue in North Hollywood, California, and delivered by Dr. Joey McDonald. For more info on us, please check out nohofumc.com or find us on Facebook and Twitter under NoHoFUMC.